Hey, welcome back. Thanks again for listening to our conversation with Josh to hear his story. At this point, if you haven't heard that, we encourage you to go back and listen so that you have context for this next conversation. For this last part of Josh's story, we sat down with his mom to hear her perspective as a mother walking through this season with her son. And so we hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.
Here when you met Mr. Josh last time, so say hello, Josh.
Hello.
And we've got his lovely mother, Miss Debbie. So hello, Miss Debbie.
Hello, everyone.
Well, I forgot where I was going. Oh, Miss Debbie, tell us a little bit about yourself and just what do you do? Like, how long have you been coming?
I am a nurse. I am Jimmy Bowen's daughter, who has been coming to Ring of Church of God for years and years and years and
Long
decades.
time, yeah.
I don't even know how long. I came to the church probably in 1990, but again fell away from the church and eventually came back. My roots were always at Ring of Church of God, but I had some issues that I had to get through before I finally committed.
Yes, ma'am.
To that. And but like I said, I am a nurse. I've done bedside nursing for 15 years. Went to the OR for a little while, and now I'm a hospice nurse, and I'm super happy about that.
Awesome, good deal. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your service in the nursing nursing industry. Well, we're so happy that you are here today, and like I said, we're gonna kind of continue from part one with Josh's story. If you haven't seen or listened to part one, episode one of season one, Josh's story, I strongly encourage you to go do that before you listen to this, because it just won't make a lot of sense. So go back and listen to episode one, Josh's story, if you haven't done it already. And we're going to pick up today with Josh's mom and really look at this from her perspective. So forgive me, Miss Debbie, but I'm going to read this because I feel like I don't think I could do it justice just trying to do it by memory. So I'm just going to say this. We got to hear Josh's story last time, the whole thing. And for us, it was the first time hearing his whole story. But for you, it's something that you lived every day. And I think for any parent watching your child struggle through any situation can be difficult. And certainly, the older they get, our level as parents often changes, and the level of control that we have in those changes. So from your perspective, Miss Debbie, and from my mother's perspective, what was that journey like from you?
It was huge. I mean, it was life-changing. It was something that you don't expect to happen when you're raising your children. I mean, especially back then. Now I know it's more common for things like that to happen, it seems like. But back then, it's something you just didn't even think about could happen. So it was very difficult. And as Josh was growing up, I know, there was a lot of things that I did notice that was different about him. But he and I were like always close, and but he was definitely different. They picked on him more, so I think because of that, it made me want to kind of baby him a little more, maybe.
Sure.
But anyway, yes, there was that. But still something that you would never think in the end what happened, what that did happen would happen. You just didn't think of it that way. You want me to go ahead and start?
Sure,
my story? So, like I said, he was different, but he was so dedicated to church, more than any of my other children. I mean, Jessica went to church a lot too, but she had a kind of a little rebellious streak and kind of, as well, just like all children do. But Josh never. He was just like, he was in church more than any of us, for sure. And he had, he would write in journals and, just so many things. during that high school time when he was going through high school, I decided to go back to college, and that's when I went to college to Armstrong to become a nurse. About the same time that I was going to Armstrong, Josh started going to Armstrong. He graduated, and he decided he wanted to go to Armstrong. So we kind of, I don't know if we ever rode together. Seemed like we did. But anyway, we were both going to the same school. So anyway, I remember one day we were coming home, and I feel like we were coming home from school, but I'm not sure. It was lots of years ago. And we were driving up our driveway, and Joshua turned to me and said, "Mom, I'm struggling with some things, and what would you say if I were to tell you that I had an attraction probably to something that was not right, but I still, I can't help it, and I don't know what to do exactly about it." And in all honesty, I knew it at that moment. Mm-hmm. I knew what that meant, and that is odd, but just because of some things that I know he never was very good at sports, and I know there was some times he didn't feel like he fit in certain places, and I could see those things as he was growing up, but when that was said, it was just like hit me. And I remember opening the mailbox because we were driving by, and I remember opening the mailbox and was getting the mail out. And I just stopped the car and said, "Josh, whatever it is that you're struggling with, every person has something they have to struggle with." Yeah. I said, I'm sorry. So just know that it could be alcohol, it could be porn, there are so many different sins that people have problems with that we all have our cross to bear. We all have to say no to those things and, turn our face towards God, and God will help us get through those. Those are all sins each one of us has to battle with. So I feel like this is probably just one of those sins that you have that you will need to just, that you would just have to struggle with. Something you may always have to struggle with. Yeah. But it's just for you to follow God and to do what God, because God has a plan for your life. And I remember telling him this over and over throughout. I said, I even remember telling him at times that, Satan is going to stalk you worse than anyone because of your dedication to the church and because he does have a mission for you. He does have a plan for your life. I know he loved doing the little mission trips, and but I think he had a heart for mission in the community, just being right here, touching people's lives that were close to us. Yeah. Because we had talked and I had read those things. So I wanted him to know, like I said many times, I had told him that Satan will be fighting you harder than anyone else. When there is a plan on somebody's life, he's going to fight to destroy those things. So we went on about our day, and I didn't hear anything more about it, but it was in the back of my mind that had been asked. And it's amazing when those things are brought to light, even though I wasn't for sure, but I was sure. Right. I would go to school to Armstrong and started seeing more homosexual people, and I started noticing more. I was like, it's amazing how many you see. And I'm not trying to be, I don't know how to say it and not be, I'm not trying to be ugly by any means, but It's just something you don't notice until it comes up in your own life. And then I was very hurt and very concerned. It was later on when, it wasn't that, maybe a month later, that he started not coming home. Maybe a night or two, and then it ended up being longer. And he would just tell me he was staying at a friend's house. And honestly, I look back now, and I know that I was not in a place. Like I say, I was separated from my husband, and I was trying to go to school and get a degree so I wouldn't have to depend on that, so that I would be able to support myself, because I knew I didn't know what my future held. I was not in a place where I could be that prayer warrior that he needed. I did not know how to go to battle for my son's soul at that moment.
Now, at that time, did you, like, and Josh, maybe you remember, but had Josh come out at that point in time?
No.
Okay, so this is still kind of...
This was during that whole time. So at the mailbox, when I pretty much figured out what it was going on. And at that point, you don't realize where you are in your life. You have to look back and see and know why these things happened and why. And I wasn't in that position, and nursing school was super hard, and especially at 42 years old. It was very hard. So being focused on that and your grown children, is super difficult. And I'm just being real. Yep.
Especially with me, who you never really had to worry about me.
No. He was in church when no one else was. I mean, he was just like, everybody would dream to have a child like that. But so I didn't think about it. But then as he started not coming home and his demeanor changed, you could see it in the way he reacted towards me, or just his personality began to change. He eventually did come home and just kind of pack his bag, like he was going to be gone for just a few days. Yeah. Yeah,
I think, and you were wondering where I was going, because I was still living there at the house. And then, I remember telling you that I was staying with our neighbor at the time, who lives in the dorms at Armstrong. And when really I was going to stay with my first boyfriend in the dorms. But I told you it was our neighbor, and I would be gone for a couple of days, and it might be a regular thing. I might start staying there regularly. But other than that, I don't think there was more to it. I think I said that, grabbed my clothes, and left.
Yeah, and I believe it ended up being a post on Facebook is what we finally decided. That there was a post on Facebook that someone noticed, and contacted Josh about it. And when they did, he knew that I would find out. And so he then talked to me about what was going on at that point. Now, of course, again, I was already suspicious, but still in total denial and shock, totally didn't want to believe it, didn't know what to do, didn't know how to handle it.
Did you feel, I guess, hesitation in terms of bringing it up, or did you feel comfortable to talk about it with him or with anybody else?
Josh and I have always been able to talk, always. But there was the difference.
Yeah.
He didn't want to give me any information. He didn't want to talk to me. Really, it was more like he just kind of packed his bag and I gotta get out of here. I gotta go. And he was just different. It was obvious. And I remember going to Jessica, I remember going to Jonathan, and I was like crying and bawling, and
Those are your other kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you guys see any of this? Did you know this? What happened? Do y'all know? Does anybody know what happened? What did I do? What, of course, the mom always immediately, what did I do wrong? What did I miss? Why couldn't I see this coming? And Jonathan, nobody. I mean, Jessica just couldn't believe it. And Jonathan was like, Mom, it's just a stage. It's fine. It'll be fine. It's just a stage. He'll be back. It'll be okay. And all I could think of was, no, it's not okay. It's not okay. And to me, he felt dead. And I don't mean that he was dead to me. I just meant he just walked out and he's dead. And I couldn't get that out of my mind. And I grieved just like he was dead. The grief was unreal. And I would try to talk to him, and I would try to invite him over and try to. And then there came to all this confusion about how to handle it and what do I do as a mother. And so honestly, I didn't do anything because, like I said, at that point in my life, I wasn't in a place to go to my knees and start praying as a prayer warrior. And I was so busy with school and with trying to just survive at that moment that I couldn't help him as much as I needed to. I feel like I needed to. But looking back on those things now, I see where God worked and gradually brought me to where I needed to be in that situation. I mean, I eventually graduated. Like Josh said in the beginning, we would talk a lot. Sometimes we'd go a couple months without talking because I would accidentally say something that would not be approving of where he was, and so he would not talk to me. And that happened a good bit throughout the whole time, honestly. But I always would reach back out and, just make sure I love you, I miss seeing you, could we meet up and John and I ended up getting married in 2009. And we would go see Josh a lot of times wherever he was. Like if he was working at Bar Food, we went to see him at Bar Food. When he was at Moon River, we went to see him at Moon River. There was a time he was working out on the beach. So we tried to figure out how to show him how much we loved him, but then also show that we don't really approve of what you're doing. But I'm going to put myself in these positions because I do love you, I'm going to meet you where you are.
How difficult was that for you?
Oh, gosh. It was always hard getting there and going there, but when I would see him, I just loved him, and that, it was just always so happy to see him because it would usually go 3 or 4 months without seeing him.
Yeah.
Because he did, I guess, build up a wall against, because I obviously made it a point to let him know that we did not approve of, no matter how much I love you, Josh, I don't approve. I don't believe this is God's will for you. I know that God has a plan for you, and this is not it. And so I would make sure that was very known, but that I still love you more than life, and I would still be there when he called, or anytime he had a problem with a relationship, and he would call me and talk about it, and I would be there for him. But still being, it's hard as a mother because you're trying to be very careful what you say and how you say it, because I didn't want the thing that would have been terrible is if I had said anything like, I never want you to be my son again, and run him off and then never see him again. You know, then he would be dead to me. And then there's all those fears that come up in a mother, like I said previously, like, what did I do wrong, or what? But also, what if something happens to him? What if, you know, I could think of a lot of times, because he was in bad scenes a lot, and sometimes I would see him and he'd have a black eye, and
It was a brawler. It was a brawler on the street.
Wow.
You're a brawler.
his face would be bruised or whatever, and I'm just like, what if he dies and he doesn't know Jesus? So there's so much to the story that I could go on about, but
well, and I will say too that I didn't make it easy for her, especially in the beginning. I was so stubborn. I don't want to keep putting that on me, but I was very stubborn. And it was, I do remember one moment with a family event where it was, I told her, I put my foot down. I was like, if so-and-so, my partner at the time isn't invited, you're not going to see me. So there were moments where I was that was a hard line for me earlier. So I did not make it easy for you all the time. And I knew that. Like, I knew how I was being. Mm-hmm. But then for her and John to push through those moments, I think really is where I saw just how much that she loved me, you know. And the things that she would say, they, you know, and I knew, I also had an understanding that, you know, she doesn't know necessarily how she's coming across, because again, in that moment, like at the time, like this is very new to a lot of people, certainly new to our family, immediate family. So how to deal with these situations, how to talk about these things, we didn't really know how. So on top of just not being easy to talk to about it, I knew she wasn't trying to offend me in any way. I knew she wasn't trying to drive me away. But there were so many times I can think back on where I was just like, man, you're a jerk, you know, like me being a jerk to you. Mm-hmm. So I did not make it easy. And I, you know, I'm glad that you kept pushing. I'm glad that you kept trying. And I'm glad that I was able to understand where you were coming from. It was never misconstrued to where I thought that you were against me in any way. I never felt that from you.
I remember one time that he invited me. He went out of his way to invite me to an event where he was going to be on stage. And he was going to be with one of his partners. And I made it a point to make sure that I was going to go and this was just before you left Savannah. I think you left Savannah right after this. But anyway, I made a point to go there and be there for him. And I ended up sitting with his, at that time, partner. And he was so nice. I mean, they're all people with, you know, they're just like we are. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not trying to be, I don't know how, sometimes I may not say it in the right way, but he was so nice and he was so kind. And, you know, it just makes me know more that we're just so confused and such a deceived people, and everybody is out searching for something, mm-hmm. some kind of love and social acceptance. And
well, I think that's great that you point that out. It's so hard sometimes in the church to think. It's so easy from in the church to think them versus us.
Yes.
And it is like it's exactly that. Like everyone, it doesn't matter who it is or what they're battling, what they're fighting with, what they're struggling with, what they're addicted to, whatever their problems are. We are all just people. And, you know, that whole community is not bad because they think that this is the way for them. They have bad they're just misdirected. They're misguided. Bad people can do good things, like people, but it's hard within the church to think of everyone like that. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, there's security there, like, there's a protection aspect there, I think, which is important, but it's also important not to lose sight that everybody's lost.
Yeah.
Everyone falls short
Yeah.
of God's glory.
Yeah.
And that's such
His
a good
standard,
point. Yeah, and what you said, and Debbie, that's so good to not look at it as the church people and these people or this and us and them, but we are a fallen creation.
Yeah.
All of us
Yes.
are a fallen creation who have all been deceived and actively trying to be deceived.
Yeah.
To look at anyone who struggles with any addiction or sin through that lens, I think there's a lot of that opens so many doors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's hard. That's hard for people to do.
Yeah. And it's hard to sympathize or empathize with those people, with certain people too, because it's, I know it's not possible with everyone, and not everyone is called to minister to everybody. There's certain people that you click with and you respond to, but it is important to keep in mind and realize that you were once lost, and God found you and pulled you to where you are now.
Yeah.
You are not too good to go back and meet someone where they are. You are not too high to kneel down and wash someone else's feet.
Mm-hmm. So I felt a bond with this guy that Josh was with at that time. And I asked Josh about him a lot. He was in my heart a lot. I saw his face a lot. For me, as a mother, I prayed what I felt like were the best prayers I could pray all during this time. Don't make sure I don't say the wrong thing. Make sure I do the right thing. What can I do to draw him closer to us? What do I need to do? How do I need to act when he has someone? Should I invite them over? And in fact, we did invite one of his friends over one time. So we were trying all the things to reach him, to what was the best, because we didn't want to lose contact. We wanted to keep Josh in our life. So we tried all the things. And I think every mother goes through that same confusion. I don't know what to do. I think there are some mothers that just say, hey, no, this is it, you're out. No. But no, I refused. I just put my foot down and refused. This is not going to happen to us. And so in 2021, a friend of mine's daughter got COVID, and she was in her 20s. And she was a good friend, but that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I had already been through a lot of the COVID as a nurse, saw many people die. I was terrified about it. So, man, I threw my Bible out on the table, and I just went to war for that child. And I literally set everything out and said, God, whatever is in the way between me and you that is hindering any of my prayers, I want you to purge it now. In the name of Jesus, I rebuke it now. So, in that month of July of 2023, I was doing some things that I should not have been doing. And he definitely brought it to my attention. So it was that point that I learned how God could listen to me. So I began to pray for that young girl, and Joshua, of course, continued to pray for Joshua. But for that young girl, I went to battle for her, and she did survive amazingly. It was a miracle. She was on a vent for months, and she just had a baby, and it was just a terrible situation. Anyway, she came out of it fine. I grew closer to God, learned how to pray. Not long after that, John went through some things. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because it took these situations to happen for me and John to get in the position to go get Josh. So, and all that, after us going to get Josh, that's when we saw it. That's when you can look back and see what God did through that whole lifetime, that whole 15 years, to get you ready for this moment. Yeah. And that's where I think providence comes in, because God, you know, He has a plan. He knows everything we're going to say before we say it. He knows every step we're going to take before we take it. He knows all those things. So some things happened to John, and he got purged as well. Broken, purged. Brought me and him closer together, and again had me going back to war for my son. Because then the girl got out of hospital, I focused completely on Joshua. Prayed a lot. I don't think he was aware of these things that was going on, because, like I said, there were times we'd talk, and then there was times we wouldn't talk. And then, like he said, I think out of the blue, he texted me and said, I'm going to be in Savannah. I just want to let you know that, because if I come up on the Finder, you'll know I'm here, and I don't want you to be offended because I didn't tell you. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And he was like, I want to have lunch with you if that's okay. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. I would love to see you. And then he said, you know, I won't be alone. And I said, I think we were texting that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I didn't answer him because I wanted to vomit. I'm sorry. Because that's not what I was expecting. You know, Josh usually didn't put me on the spot like that. Never, you know, he would never put me on the spot. And I felt like he did. He put me on the spot, and I had to make a quick decision, and I couldn't. Prayed about it, thought about it, didn't know how to handle it. And so finally, it was a couple of days later, and I told him that I just didn't think it was a good idea, that I hated that I couldn't see him. And so that went by. So John's mother died, and we ended up going to Louisiana. But on the way home, we were talking about all the things that have been happening in society lately with the transgender and things just coming out like never before, and the end of the world, and with the COVID and all that stuff, and how the sin is just, everything's so rampant nowadays. And so I just got to, of course, then again thinking about Josh, wanting to just ask him some questions. I just wanted to sit down and say questions I have had for 15 years that I couldn't understand. So I did. I called him up and I said, I was not working in Macon. I actually hoped we would meet in Macon that time, because I wouldn't have to drive all the way to Atlanta. But he was like, Mom, he says, I have to work that night. If we're going to have lunch, and he was pretty, if we're going to have lunch, you're going to have to come all the way here.
You're going to have to work for it.
Still not making it easy.
It's like, you're going to have to drive all the way here. And I'm like, whatever it takes. Okay.
So this is leading up to that.
This was in
that lunch
November. I'm
meeting.
sorry. I'm trying to.
No,
I'm
no,
trying
that's
to
good
jump right
because-
over to the
Yeah,
very
you're good.
important.
Because I know when Josh was telling that in his story, I thought this is good. I want more details
Yes.
on this from
Yeah.
your side. So
Yes. So I prayed about this visit, of course, and what should I say, and I was thinking things at home just in my prayer time, and I think we were going through that one of those series, and it was. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you can ask whatever you will, and I will do it for you. And I continued to claim that. I continued to pray that. I would also pray, give Josh a new heart. A lot of times during that 15 years when I was praying and not knowing exactly how to pray would be like, God, whatever it takes to get him home. Even if it's he goes to jail or if he gets sick or whatever it takes, Father, just bring him home. I don't want him to live a life without you, whatever it takes. So I would actually take verses and put his name in the verse and pray the verses. And then so I was doing that, but I knew that as a mother and as a Christian, we cannot let people go on living in sin and not tell them that they could go spend the rest of their lives in hell. And I know that's strong and people don't like to talk about that now. But you're not a loving person if you're not going to tell them the truth.
Right.
So that was really on my heart. I said, I have to tell Josh that he's in danger, or I'm not a loving mother. So I went, met him in Atlanta, got up early, drove all the way to Atlanta. I think I got there at 11:30 to the barbecue place, loud barbecue place.
And she paid.
So we sat down and started talking, and like he said, we were like just chit-chatting about the weather and how's this and that and how's everything at your job. And so and then another thing I was trying to break the ice was, what do you think about all this transgender stuff that's coming out, and how do you feel about that, and what are your thoughts on that? Just trying to make conversation, and also curious as to what his thoughts were. And basically he just told me that he didn't understand that either, because that was not something that he had ever struggled with, that he knew what sex he was, and that was not something that he had a problem with. And he said even the people that he hung with, that was not an issue he had. So finally it got to the point where it got more serious, and I just said, Josh, if there is anything I did, in your childhood that made a difference or affected the way that you turned out, I would really want to know what it was. If I did something wrong, if I didn't do enough, if I didn't do it, right, or if it's because I was divorced and, I was a single mother, and, there's so many things that people blame this on. And I wanted to know what exactly it was. And he said, Mom, you've always been a great mother. You've always loved me. He said there was nothing that he could pinpoint that I did wrong, that it wasn't me, it was something he struggled with, years prior to him actually coming out. And so that was not a problem. And I did, tell him, I said, if there ever was or is anything I've ever done to hurt you, please tell me. And because I'm sorry, it's not, I never meant to hurt you, never meant to do anything to hurt you. And he, I think he was more soaking things in than giving me responses. Josh has always been one to sit and mull over the question before he actually answers it. Now, his answer might be 2 hours long, but
That's a good one.
but he does mull over it before he says anything, and so he didn't really answer that question. And so then finally, I just said, Josh, I have to ask you, if you were to die today, do you feel like you would go to heaven, or do you think you'd go to hell? And he said, well, I'm a good person. And again, like he said, we just looked at each other. And I said, Josh, I said, you have been in church so long. I said, you know, there are a lot of good people out there that are not going to be in heaven. And I said, Josh, I came here not only to make sure that we are okay, but to let you know I'm worried for your soul. And if I don't do that, I don't love you. I am not the right mother. I am not a good mother if I don't tell you the absolute truth. And I don't want you to, I don't want to lose you. I don't want anything to happen to you. And I think we went on, the conversation kind of got, that was heavy. So it kind of went on to, what do you want for Christmas? What can I get for you for Christmas? Which kind of lightened it up a little bit. And he said, you know, he did tell me about the boots that he wanted. And that was actually at the table. We were still talking about the boots. And I said, okay, I'll give them to you, but I don't mind giving them to you. But I do ask, I think when we got out to the truck is when I finally said, I will buy you the boots, but I do need you to do me a favor when they arrive. I said, when they arrive, I want you to look in the mirror every morning for 30 days and say, God, if you are real, reveal yourself to me. I said, that's all I asked, Josh.
What made you?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
What made you? Ask that question.
Did you think that before, or it just kind of came out?
It just came out. Les asked me that same question, and I don't know where that came from.
It wasn't planned then.
No.
Okay.
I don't know where that came from. I mean, I think the looking in the mirror and saying, God, reveal yourself to me, I did think about that prior, but not like 30 days. I don't know why. But we were also, he had to go to work. We were kind of rushing. And he did at that moment tell me that I had hurt him, and that the whole situation with him coming to Savannah, me not going to lunch with the two of them together, hurt him. And I told him how sorry I was, and that I felt like, but he even said, I put you on the spot, and I know that. But it did hurt me, and I want you to know. And I was like, Josh, I'm sorry, because I love you, and I do not ever want to hurt you. I said, I only want what's best for you, which is why I've come here today. And he said, okay. And then when I told him about saying that, he said, okay, I'll try it. I promise I'll do that. And so I got in the truck and drove back home. And I prayed, of course, the whole way. But I knew in my heart, I knew that he wasn't going to do that. You know, as a human being, the human side of me was like, he's not even going to remember to do that. He's not going to do that. So first thing, when I got home, I talked to Les. I was like, yeah, this is what happened. I told him, I gave him, he's going to say that for 30 days in the mirror and for a pair of shoes. But it was months, you know, and I had already sent him that book, and I had already read the book. And the book was, it was just, it was crazy, hurtful. Broken.
And what was the name of that book again?
It was A Change of Affection. And I've read several books actually about these topics. And one of the things I took away a lot of those books was how lonely the person is once they leave. So I had talked to Jessica about it multiple times about how I want Josh back and I want Josh to be where he needs to be. But I'm so worried about him being lonely. I said, that's one of the biggest things that scares me about him coming home or coming back to us, to a lifestyle following Christ, is him being alone. But that book, he said when he had that encounter with God, he said, I had an encounter with the creator of the universe. And that's better than any relationship you could have here on earth, and overcomes that loneliness because of the fact that he has that relationship with the creator of the universe.
Perspective shift.
Yes. Yeah. So I had already sent him that book, and he put it to the side, just like the other books. And so we went a few months again without talking, like it not abnormal, but I would still pray. In fact, it come to the point where I was walking around my barn and my house, and I would just claim all of this for Jesus. This all belong to you. I want this, the Holy Spirit to use this. I want you to use this. And I would pray for Josh to come home. And I would just walk around and pray those things over my property. And so eventually Josh started texting me. I was in a job I hated, actually. That's a lot, another story. But anyway, Josh kept texting me. So he started texting me little bits. And he'd say, hey, Mom, how you doing? And I'd be like, hey, Josh, I'm okay. How are you? And he's like, oh, I'm good. How's work? It's good. And then I wouldn't hear from him. But I knew.
Something was
shifting.
Is that what you knew?
It was shifting. Mm-hmm. So I just kept on. I kept pressing in. And my friend whose daughter was sick has been my friend. And I messaged her and said, please help me pray that Josh comes home. And she and I would talk and text and pray and continued to pray about it. And I know Les prayed. I know my dad prayed. I know multiple people have been praying, over the years. And we are super grateful for all the people who prayed for Josh. But there, once again, those texts got closer and closer. And then he finally texted me one day and he said, can I come home? And of course, I was at work and I just hit the floor. I mean, my knees buckled and I was like, yes. Yes, you can come home.
And it's funny that that's exactly what you were praying.
Yeah.
For him to come home.
Yes. And he said, I said, yes. I said, I can get the truck right now. I can go hook it up to the trailer, and I can go get you right now. I said, I'll leave right now and go do it.
How much over the speed limit did you drive?
So he said, no, Mom. He said, no, Mom. He said, I got a lot of loose ends here. I need to tie up. I got 2 months on a lease. And I got to give notice. I still got all these things. And he was making excuses. But I couldn't push him. I couldn't go get him yet. So I was like, okay, it's okay. But I did tell him, I said, listen, don't worry about that lease. I'll pay that lease out and you won't have to worry about it. And he's like, well, there's a guy staying here. He's a foreign exchange student, I think. Yeah. That was staying there and he needed to, and I was like, he can stay there. We can just take care of it. But he said, no, not yet. Just give me some time. So, of course, I did, but continued to pray and walk around my barn like I was Joshua or something. But he that's when I started pursuing him to read that book. You know, Josh, you just need to try to just read that book, because he had gone through a couple of days where he was texting me more and more and more, and I could feel the hurt. And I was like, Josh, please just read that book. And I said, and I'll sit down and read it with you. I've read it once, but I'll do it again. So it took him 2 days, I think. He read through that whole book.
I don't know. I feel like it took weeks. It was hard in a good way, but
oh gosh, it was beautiful. He would call me crying, and he would text me, and he was crying, and he would text me what part he was reading, and then he was like, I think the final part was the rich man, was when the rich man asked Jesus, what does it take to follow you? And he said, you have to leave and give up everything to follow me. And that's where he broke.
Wow.
On that story. And that's what he said. And then, so we were talking through that whole day, and then I think he finally said, Mom, I can't do this by myself. I can't do it alone. There was one point he kept saying, keep pushing me. Keep pushing me. But this day he was like, I can't do it. And I said, it's okay, I can. So I went straight up to my manager and said, I will not be here tomorrow, and I may not be here for the whole next week. I need to go get my son. And she's like, okay. She didn't ask me any questions. No, and she said, okay. So I called John. He took off work the next day. We left at 3 o'clock that morning. I didn't want to give him the night. I didn't, but he kept promising me he would not change his mind. Dang, I missed that part. I really want to tell that story. I'm sorry. I might go back. I'm sorry. Anyway, didn't want him to change his mind. So we did give him the time. He said, I need to pack up some things. And I said, well, just pack up what you need, and we'll just come get the rest of it another day. You've got 2 months of the lease, so they're not going to throw it out. We'll get another day. So John and I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. We drove all the way over there and got there probably 6:15, 6:30. Man, and Josh lives in an apartment where you go down 3 flights of stairs, you go up 4 flights of stairs, and then it was just a lot. So it took us like 40 trips up and down them stairs to get all that stuff in that trailer. I don't know how to explain how that felt. I felt amazed that God had done this, but also scared. Because the human side of me was like, I've been through this before, and this might be the perfect time to say this. Because Josh, when he originally came out and broke up with that first partner, or was having problems with that first partner, he did come home to me. And he couldn't sleep. And he paced the halls, and I could hear him. And of course, I wasn't sleeping anyway, because I already knew. And I was praying. But he was pacing the floor, and I could hear him, and I just finally just got up and sat at the table and was hoping he would talk to me. He did sit at the table, and he was crying, and he just was like, I can't leave him. He was so worried about that person. And I didn't want to offend him or hurt him or say anything wrong. So I don't think I said a lot. I was so hurt because I had been praying about it. And I was like, my kid is coming home. My son is coming home. And I think I even texted Les and Tressa, and they were both like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. So he walked out, and like he said, he remembers leaving me, and I was sitting at the table. And I think I sat at that table for a long time. Broken. But that grieving process I went through the first time was nothing compared to the grieving process I went through the second time. So when he left that time, so hard. And then, so when I went to get him in Atlanta, and that, of course, kept coming up, was like, you know, because Satan will remind you those things. And was also concerned about that happening. But we did not give ourselves time to think about all that. So we loaded everything as fast as we could. Josh rode in his car by himself. It was loaded with stuff. And me and John got in the truck, and we pulled the trailer, and we headed to the house. And
and while we were packing things up in Atlanta, that same feeling I got the first time I went back home, and I couldn't stay the night because I was in so much pain. The whole time we were packing up that place in Atlanta, I felt that pain. I could not stop crying. I mean, there were a few times where I just stopped because I was just so, it just hurt. It hurt so bad. Everything, it's like we were talking yesterday about, like, I don't know what that is, because emotionally, and, you know, me to get to that point to leave Atlanta, there was so much involved and so much planning and so much thinking on my part that I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So it wasn't that I felt like I was being forced to leave or anything like that. I just think the best way, I mean, the Bible says that you are a slave to sin. And man, it's just like there is a process when you've been in it that long, and when that's all you know for an extended amount of time, those shackles just keep getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And I felt in that moment, packing up that apartment in Atlanta, I felt like I had to chop my arm off to get free. I felt like I had to get rid of pieces of myself and leave them there, to be free of those chains. And I mean I just, you know, the first time I went through it, I couldn't do it. The first time, I mean, I left, you know, I went back to that lifestyle the first time I encountered that feeling. But I don't know, older and wiser, I guess this time I knew, but also I'd felt that before. So knowing that this was my decision, I had to do this. There was no other way. All the thoughts and the things that the healing even in that time that God had shown me in those couple of weeks leading up to me leaving Atlanta, like I just, that progression, it's like, this is part of it. I just remember thinking it's okay. Let me feel this for a minute. Because it is a death. I had to grieve it. I had to put it to death. And, you know, they don't tell you about that. And that's what that process was. I didn't realize it early on, but in Atlanta and leaving Atlanta, I understood that is what needed to be done. And I just kept, once I get past this, let me just get past this and I'll be okay. This is going to be the hardest part. Let me just get past it and I'll be okay. So you're worried about me backing out, and I'm just trying to get through it. Like,
so anyway, we did eventually ended up leaving, and like Josh said, I was concerned with him being behind us, and I just, I don't even remember if me and John talked. I don't remember any of that. I just remember watching Josh behind me. And I remember us bringing everything home, and it's not like we had a plan. It's not like we talked really a whole lot. We just started. Josh didn't do a lot of talking. I think he was still processing a lot. We just started moving everything into that. And again, Providence was bringing all of this together. We had an apartment in the barn that was open that we had just finished. There's just so many things that you can look back on and say, man, that timing was right on. So we were able to move all his stuff in there. The thing was empty. We just put all his stuff in there.
Well, and not to mention that was where you were praying the most, was in the barn.
So true.
And I ended up living, I'm still living there now.
We're walking around.
That's so true. So true. So, oh man, it was incredible. It was incredible, but scary. And again, that flooded back into my system about being lonely and how, and I know I do remember kept telling John, I'm afraid he's going to be lonely. I'm really worried about him being lonely. And I couldn't leave him alone. I couldn't. I couldn't. I kept coming over and checking on him and just coming over and watching him and helping him get his stuff and trying to give him a little space, but I couldn't. So every morning at 4:30 in the morning, I would get up and go to the barn and pray. I would pray outside the apartment. Instead of going around the barn this time, I went inside the barn and prayed outside because half of it is an apartment and the other half is gym, actually. So I would go in the middle and just walk up and down and pray. You know, Satan, you don't belong here. I rebuke that spirit of homosexuality. You do not belong here. This place belongs to Jesus. Everything on it belongs to Jesus. My son belongs to Jesus. You know, and just kept on and on and on praying and just battling every day. I rebuke every evil thought, every evil spirit that comes against him, just rebuking everything every morning. And it got to the point where Josh could see things. And he would text me and say, Mom, what did you pray about this morning?
That coming from the person that you said when you were in college, you didn't know how to pray.
I didn't know how to pray. So, yes, but there was, okay, so there's more, sorry. But anyway, 23 days later, after he came, and we went through a lot of it was emotional roller coaster for him. And he did meet with Les, I think 3 times a week to start with, and then it got to 2 times a week, and then it got less and less. Anyway, 23 days after he came, he wanted to go back to Atlanta. And he came, I could see it coming. I could feel it coming. I knew it was coming. And I was, again, trying not to be afraid, but I was afraid. He said, I promise I'm not going to stay. I have a TV in the apartment that needs to go to my friend that he had just broke up with. And I'm going to do that, and then I'll come right back. And I'm like, why can't he just go to the apartment and get the TV? You know, just trying to say that, you know, what is the deal here? Mama, I just need to go. And I remember I called Les, Josh wants to go back to Atlanta, and I don't want him to go back, and I'm scared, and all these. And Les was so kind. Les is he thinks so differently sometimes, and he was like, that's okay. That might be okay. That might be what he needs to do to bring closure to everything. So he said it may not be a bad thing. So I put him and Tress on group text, and I was texting him every second of what was going on. And Josh ended up leaving, and I watched him drive out of the driveway, and he didn't get 9 miles down the road, and his tire blew out.
I remember that story. remember
Gosh,
you
I don't think
telling
I've
me
heard that.
It was.
I remember you
I have
telling me
never seen a tire like this in my life. Like it was unreal. I was like,
Just
this isn't even
disintegrate, huh?
possible. Like what? It's got like it was like whelps all over the side of it. I'm like,
Oh my
what in the
gosh,
world?
man.
Like. I said, okay, God, that's, you're funny, and
He was changing the tire on the side of the road laughing.
yeah.
Saying, okay, you've got my attention.
Because because selfishly, I wanted to see my ex so bad. And I would sit and I would try and make a plan. How can I convince everyone around me that I need to go to Atlanta? And I was settled on this. I was like, okay, well, this is good. This will work. They'll believe me and they won't be on my back about it and all this other stuff.
I had already told Jessica, she was praying. Everybody was praying.
So even just leading up to this moment, I was just already trying to sneak around things, and trying not to be found out. And I was like, keep my head up. Like I got this under control. And which, I did end up going to Atlanta and seeing him and getting the TV to him. But I love that moment because it's one of the many times in the past 2 years that, that it's just God is, it's like he hears you, he sees you. He doesn't always step in, but when he needs to, he will, and it was one of those things where there were some doubts that I had in my mind about all these, some things going on and fitting in. Am I going to fit in here? How do I fit in here? I didn't feel like I had a place because I didn't feel like anyone understood me. So I was like, let me just go back to Atlanta. Let me get a little bit of social, interaction with somebody who I know knows me. And I'll fill up my tank and then come back and I'll be fine, and it was let me just get that. And, the week or so, I remember reading about Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's wife turning back and turning into a pillar of salt when she looked back after the angels told her not to do that. And just the way that all of that lined up with the tire, I was looking back at Atlanta like my past, trying to go back or trying not to leave it completely and just leaving my foot in there, and it's just some of those things, those little love letters that God likes to send us, it's it blows my mind. And that blew my mind like the tire blew, it was just, and there are so many instances like that have happened in the past 2 years that are just, going back to what I said in the first episode, it's I've seen too much, I've seen too much. I know too much. That is not me anymore. I cannot go back there. I do not have an option. It's not there. And even if I were to try, it would not be the same. Yeah. I am not the same.
Yeah. When he finds a way to bring us to that point of breaking and begins to pull things out of us that he doesn't like, it's hard to walk away. It's impossible. I'll go say it's impossible to walk away and not be able to say, I'm not that man anymore. It doesn't mean we forget. Doesn't mean you forget. Doesn't mean that you don't think about the past or the regrets, the guilt, the shame. A lot of that is there a lot of times, but to be able to make that statement is, I'm not that man anymore.
Yeah.
Says a lot about what he has done and continues to do. Yeah. Debbie, as we bring this session to a close, if there's a mom or a parent who might be listening to this or listen to this at some point, what would you say is the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway from all that you've walked through with Josh and been through? If you could give them What would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
Well, first off, I would say, don't let Satan put that on you. Don't let him convince you that it's your fault, that you did it. It's something you did that caused it. That is a lie. You don't have that much power to make someone a sinner like that. I don't believe that. And it took me a long time to believe that it wasn't my fault. And to make sure that you love that child unconditionally, no matter what. Always be there. Josh called me in the middle of the night. I would be there. I loved him through facial changes when he fell onto concrete slabs and just all those things. Just love him unconditionally. But always definitely do make sure that he knows where you stand or she knows where you stand, because it's both ways. I would have been the same way if it had been Jessica. Just make sure your children know how much you love them. And don't quit praying. Don't. Even if you don't think you know how to pray, God hears you. He knows. Yeah. He knows your heart. He hears you. Even if your prayers sound stupid, doesn't matter. He knows. Yeah. And he hears you. He hears you. And a lot of times, just like I learned, maybe it was wait until I got purged, until John got purged, and we both were ready for Josh to come back. Because things might have been different if he had seen us differently. Yeah. So just look for those things and always look, because God shows himself. When I told Josh to reveal himself, tell God to reveal himself to you, God was revealing himself to me every day. I mean, at work, a job I hated, I would see things and I'd be like, wow, that's amazing. That was God. That was the only reason I didn't make it in there, is because that's God. I have favor. So just, know that, he hears you. Don't give up praying. And also know that he could be asking you to wait. And I know that when Josh got home, I knew there was going to be a wait for him. And he is come so far in 2 years, but there was a lot of waiting and pain, and just love him through it. Keep praying. Go to battle. Go to war. There is a war over our head all the time, all day long. And sorry, one more. Satan is awake 24 hours a day. He is battling for your child, for your person, for whoever. He's battling for you every single hour, every minute of the day. And you need to think about that. And
That's
when you
good.
know that, you pray a lot different.
That's good. That's really good. Well, Debbie, if you're okay with it, I think it would be very fitting if you would close us out in prayer. Would that be okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity to come share our stories with so many people. We pray, Father, that these podcasts would go out and that they would affect people's hearts, minds, and that you would be able to use this information to maybe snatch people out of the darkness and into the light, because that is exactly what you did for us. I pray, Father, that you continue to bless all of us, continue to help us to grow. I pray that you continue to help Josh grow, Father, and I pray that, again, that these podcasts would touch people's lives, and as they continue to make more of those, that we all, as a family in the Rincon Church of God, just grow in unity and in strength and as a witness and become more like you every day. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right.
Amen.
Thanks so much for listening.